Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Unslaved. Hope you had a great holiday, Christmas time with the family, got some time off, and we are here. It is still 2019 for a couple more days, and we wanted to finish off the year with a magnum opus. It's no short than that, because we have a lot of slides to be sharing with you, lots of information to go through. Michael's been preparing this for quite some time, and so this is probably going to be a little bit of a longer show. But stay tuned, because we have a lot of very, very fascinating information, very important information to share with you. So welcome back. Welcome back, Michael. Hope you got some rest over the holidays. And I see you've been busy. You've been producing articles. You've got 3 or 4 new articles up on the Michael Tsarian site, and I'll be linking those below so people can catch up on that. But you've also been working on this presentation, the Monstrous Feminine. So let's give people a little introduction into today's show.
Thank you, David. Yeah, and hope you had a great holiday, and everyone listening. And again, a big thank to the members for a show like this. It's one of many we're going to do that could never have been done, at least not in this, sophisticated form. You know what I mean? But in any case, it's one of those ones that stayed on the shelf. But yeah, it's based. What you'll hear today is based on research that for me goes back to the early '90s to film school. After I got back to the States in late '89, within 5 days I was enrolled in film school. And that just led into a study of, the female persona as it appears in film in general, but mostly then it steered towards sort of Gothic horror film, which then went to reading books on the subject and finding out that those books were actually quite deeply psychological, some more than others, but psychology played a really big role. It played a big role in feminist critique, which at the time I was studying without any of the knowledge that I have now about it. I was studying in an academic sense, trying to make sense of, of that genre, of the image of the female in art, even if it was Victorian art and whatever, But yeah, this was more in the context of films, The Lady of Shanghai and all the great classics that one could mention, right? But as I start reading, there was so many, the feminists were really, deconstructing Freud. It was almost like they didn't pay any attention to any other psychologists. It was largely Freudian, pro and negative, right? And that interested me, and it led me in the right direction, because by the time those film school sort of studies ended, I was hooked on psychology, but it definitely happened because of those, so you could say that, movies and the movie symbolism, that I'd been interested in since the 70s, but not in any sort of psychological sense. It was this study that started in San Jose, at a film school there. And the idea was that maybe, go to San Francisco State, but, that just didn't pan out. But as I say, some books were more impressive, instructional, and probably the one that I think is, among the best, if not the best, was The Monstrous Feminine by Barbara Creedy. And that's what we're going to, we'll look at aspects of what she reveals in that book. Again, it's largely feministic. It's very critical of Freud, but I really highly recommend it. I know Caleb has coincidentally come across it, so he's reading it. Maybe we can have him back to critique today's presentation. I know he have a lot to add to what we're going to, show today. But basically, this presentation goes back to that time, to just that feminist critique, just those Gothic horror elements, and not so much later roads and threads, that I'm more sort of famous for, or whatever you want to call it. We'll be just looking as it pertains to this horror genre. And of course, there are other satellite things of interest, but just that area is itself, extremely interesting and informative when it comes even to wider issues, and even when it comes to the real literature, or even say the historical, anecdotes about vampire, right? Vampirism or whatever. Don't forget that there's 2 threads that come together even in that. There's the mythical, right? Historical, like sort of Vlad the Impaler, There's elements of like Countess Bathory, right? And then there's also the sort of psychological, the fictive, right? Same it is with anything to do with crime or bizarrety. There's two threads running together, but certainly with vampires and witches, there's the whole physical act of it. I mean, witches were literally burned at the stake in the Middle Ages and later. And then there's the whole fictive element, like it might turn up in Hansel and Gretel, or the fairy tales, or even Irish legends. We talked about the Fae, and that again is either fictional, Morgan Le Fay from a famous fictional Arthurian legend, but wait a minute, behind that is the shadowy real thing, horrific, and we dealt with all of that in Ireland's satanic cults, and we'll touch on it maybe at the very, very end here, just very, very briefly, but yeah, to me, the psychological prevails. For other people, it's always going to be the mythical, the historical, right? But see, once you plugged in the psychological, which we're really going to do a treatment on that today, then I think the whole subject really comes alive, actually. So hopefully, we can be able to prove that point.
Now, with the title, The Monstrous Feminine, this is the title of this book. And I have not yet read the book, so I'm very curious to see where this is going to go. But it was interesting that as soon as we posted this announcement on the Facebook page, that title, The Monstrous Feminine, we got a lot of comments like, oh, why come you guys are always going after women? And why is it always about the bad side of the women? And why don't we ever talk about evil men or whatever? First of all, I don't think that's necessarily where we're going. And second, I was just thinking about how when we study this subject on Unslaved, and we've studied so many subjects, the amount of subjects we've covered it's unbelievable. And we've hit all the different points about psychology. And the moment you talk about any one point or focus in on it, you can get this knee-jerk reaction from people who maybe start to feel defensive about it or whatever. And this can be a touchy, controversial subject because of that. What would you say about that, Michael? And just in terms of the time we live in, I know we'll probably be bringing in elements in this presentation that are going to be very relevant to what we see happening in our culture and the social dialogue and the political scene. But the most important thing that we always want to focus on is the individual, is the development and the understanding of each individual's own psychology, how evil manifests in each of us, what kind of conditions are present that cause these different things to erupt. And there's obviously been a lot of literature and film that's been done to showcase this for both men and women. But I just wanted to throw that into the mix simply because we got a lot of feedback on it. I put my comments into those threads, but I just wanted to know, just in terms of this presentation, what would your take on that be?
It is controversial. There's no doubting that. Our platform is not level in the world. Male crime is about all that people want to talk about or focus on or even unconsciously agree upon, and all of that's correct. I'm not against that, you see. But, this subject is fascinating to me. And when I talk about it in public, I just hope that it'll be fascinating to others. But it's not going to deter me, no matter the amount of political incorrectness, even if it's triple the amount. It still wouldn't stop my own personal fascination in female psychology. And the fact that hardly anything has been written on it, what has been written on it is usually tepid or about some, hang-ups area like female phobias, frigidity and all that. It doesn't really deal with the thing in the vastness. And I find that these films, a film like, say, Hitchcock's Marnie and many others I could mention, are so much deeper than even the literature out there. So it just was amazing to me, when you watch The Lady of Shanghai or whatever it might be. These are classic films, and and there's many more that are actually quite deep. And film criticism is film criticism. And half the stuff we're going to be looking at today is acknowledged by feminists. I'll make it clear when we get to the point where, they're not. And the stuff that I'll reveal that trumps feminism, part of this presentation will be a radical critique, far more than we've even done in Dragon Mother or whatever, to show how bankrupt ultimately feminism is by watching their own steps, by following closely their own trajectory. We can show a tremendous where they went defunct, a particular area where they really fell down. I mean, and it's unarguable, actually. That's why it's taken a long time to bring this presentation to bear, because as we go, we'll be talking about films and the Monstrous Feminine, but in conclusion, we're going to show something quite, profound, that when used in the right hands and when articulated very well, signs the death warrant of all feminism. in a way that is endorsed by feminists because they made a fundamental mistake. They went after Sigmund Freud, and that's not what I fault them for, because that critique is very valid in many ways. But in their haste to do that, they made a fundamental mistake. Doesn't mean that Freud was right. In fact, he was wrong. They were correct. He made mistakes that changed the face of this world. Had he put his finger on something, if he had taken the same evidence he had in front of him and did what the feminists want, yeah, probably our world would very much be improved. And I agree with him wholeheartedly on that. But where their critique breaks down, is also in this fervor. They also made a similar mistake, one even more devastating than what Freud had done. So that's what I wanted to put right. But I discovered that years ago, and then it's like, okay, what to do with that now, right? It just never the context wasn't right. But this is an interest of mine. I assume it is implicitly in a lot of other people. It's just it's a story unfolding. It has mythical elements, it has fictional elements, it has historical elements, right? But the psychological is what's really matter, because history's done, right? Psychology still pertains to everything we're doing right now, and there's no harm in unveiling, female psychology, because the woman right now is the one who's bringing up the children of the future. So all that pontificating and waxing lyrical about how we need to change the children and how our future depends on the children. Yeah, and the parents who fucking raise them. Let's start even there. How about that? So and women have a big responsibility, and we'll touch on that. But it's all for the good. It's all for the enlightening process, of both sexes. And all I ever ask my audience to do is be open-minded, and be willing to marshal facts that have definitely been hidden from us. I mean, definitely been, obscured with other narratives that are either too timid, or too politically correct. And, I'm drawing on Camille Pally. See, I'm drawing on a host of, if you watch my Great Women's presentation, it's not even a premium, that's a podcast. Go to Great Women. I'll put the link below. Other presentations where I show, go to Adultism, the book, and look at all the female psychologists I'm citing as, mentors and stuff like that. So I'm just carrying on a sort of an avenue of research that sort of fell, by the wayside. And this Monstrous Feminine is one of the best books. It's not like other books on feminism. And that's why we'll look at it. And I suggest people even buy it and read it, because it categorizes what I'm saying. It will substantiate the points I'm making very clearly. There won't be any doubt about it. And it's just coming out of my head, nothing better to do or whatever.
Oh, no, and everything you've produced on that is incredible. And anybody that's watched any of the content we've produced on this subject, Dragon Mother, even going back to Female Illuminati, or going way back to the beginnings, your first presentations where you did a whole thing on divination in the goddess tradition. This is a continuation of that. And just like everything else, where you go, okay, here is we're in a dualistic reality. We have the masculine, feminine, positive, negative, left, right. We've always talked about that, the polarities, the yin and yang, and then manifested in nature are also these different categories, right? And then you're going to have a light and a dark side of each one, right? And that was my point when I was talking to some of these people, and just saying, when people ask you, what kind of stuff do you do podcasts on? It's like, well, lately we've been doing stuff on female psychology. Just saying that, because obviously I'm a man saying that, it's immediately looked at as, oh, you're just out there acting as a reactionary, defensive because you're a male. And it's like, no, this is a study. I can see that also in the work. And I look forward into getting into this presentation because, as you said, it's an unfolding. And in the same way that right now society is trying to say, oh, it's all about masculinity and men and building the patriarchy, and that's what screwed up the world. We've covered a lot of the elements of that, which are correct, that there have been evil men in history. There have been negative, malignant, masculine elements, as there are. But the thing that gets interesting is that then when you say, sure, we understand that, but there's also a negative feminine that needs to be understood. And that's all you've really been saying. And not to go after them and just start attacking, but to say, hey, let's analyze it. That's the whole point of psychology. And I think that's why people... Even that also is a trigger word, that word psychology. That's why people get up in arms as well, because you're asking them to look within themselves, regardless if they're man or woman, black or white, doesn't matter. You're asking for them to look within themselves because that's the process to healing, right?
Yeah, so that's absolutely right. And see, the whole idea that when it's presented, especially by feminists, it is erroneous.